Hey, welcome back. Joe Gilder here. If this is your first video you've ever seen from me, you're right towards the end of a series called Mixed Together. There should be a link below with the playlist for all the videos in this series, but basically I'm mixing a song from start to finish. Feel free to join in. Go to homestudiocorner.com/MT. You can download the tracks and mix this sucker right along with me. So in the last video, I was working through my cute little to-do list of things that needed to be fixed to call this mix done. So I'm going to finish out the list and then listen again, make a new list, and just repeat that process until I'm happy. So I've been away from this mix for a few days, which is whenever you can step away from a mix, even if it's just for a half hour or preferably like a day, and come back with fresh ears, you tend to hear lots of things that you weren't hearing before. Our brains are tricky, and it's really easy. You can ignore big major problems. So I'm hearing some things already when I hit play just to test levels that I probably want to change, but in keeping with the rules of this game, I'm just going to finish the things on this list first and then move on. So let me delete things that aren't actually where it says it was friggin' huge. That's not really a to-do. Okay, so here's our things we're going to work on. I thought the snare might have been a little loud in verse 1. Let's check and see if that's still feeling true.
Given the first clear thought, I'm suicidal, loss after loss, I don't know what to do.
I don't think so. I'm probably going to go change that snare, make it a little brighter. But that's not on the list, so we're not doing it right now. Okay, done. Bass feels mid-rangey. Could it have more low end? I was talking about verse 2. Let's go check that.
Can this be true? How could it just like utter fool? I'll just
So let's compare that to other parts in the song. So in the chorus, what does he sound like? I mean, it wouldn't hurt my feelings to get more low end out of the bass in general. So let's try that. Let's just go real simple. Let's just boost another 3 dB, 4 dB of low end in the bass. See how that feels.
we all experience the same. Let me have.
Too much. Let's go back a little bit.
We all experience the same. Let me have.
Okay, that feels good in the chorus. Let's check the verse 2. That's where I said it was a problem.
Can this be true? How could people have thought this through? Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be. Help me find.
It may just be, I mean, obviously he's playing higher up on the bass itself. I wonder, occasionally, when I do the distorted bass, it sounds good, and there's sections that maybe it doesn't work as well. Let's do this. Let's mute the distorted bass just for this section and see how that feels. So right here, until those guitars come in there. Shift M, boing, it cut it and muted it. Let's see how that works.
How can this be true? How could people have thought this through? Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and.
That feels a little better, maybe because there's no big heavy guitars, the bass doesn't need the grit and the distortion to cut through. So that feels pretty good. The only thing now is the bass feels a little quiet in that section. So I'm going to do the same thing, chop up that section of the song and just boost it by 3 dB. See how that works.
How can this be true? How could people have thought this through? Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be. Help me fight and break through me as lost as I.
Yeah, dog, that feels good. Okay, let's call that one done. Next it says chorus 2, harmonies up a little. I've done a bad job of putting markers into the song. So for the more obsessive listeners, subscribers, that's probably been bothering you this whole time. But look, I put a marker. Chorus 2. See? All's well with the world. Let's take a listen. So what did I say? I said the harmonies could be up a little in chorus 2. Yeah, I can't hear them there. Do we hear them here? So what I'm doing is I'm checking all the places where the harmonies are to see if it's just true across the board or if it's really just that verse 2. I think it's probably true across the board.
You're not alone. We all experience the same. Let me help you. You're not alone.
I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably all of them. So let's go find our background vocal fader and let's just go 3 dB up. I like 3 dB chunks. It's enough to be noticeable. 1 dB sometimes is noticeable, but I'd rather just do 3 dB increments generally is usually, if I'm not hearing it, bump it up 3 dB. A lot of times that's what it needs. So that's where I kind of default to. Let's see how that works for each of the choruses.
Not alone. We'll experience the same. Let me help you.
Okay. I think. So they're still pretty thick. So what I'm going to do is adjust the EQ so that I can hear them more clearly without them kind of messing up the middle section. So we're going to do this, this, and this. In case you weren't watching, I just did more of a cut in the mid-range and more of a boost in the top end. Now the edits aren't great, that you can hear lots of pops and stuff. I don't really care about that as much because it's back in the mix, but I did just want it to be brighter sounding. So that kind of sounds better, I think. Here it is in the mix.
Not alone. We'll experience the same.
So effectively, we've changed the volume again with the EQ, so I might bring this fader down just a smidge.
Not alone. We'll experience the same. Let me help you.
I'm still not super happy with that. I'm going to change the EQ. We're going to go to this vintage one we've been using a bunch because I think it just makes more sense. I wasn't hearing those high boosts, and boosting with kind of the stock EQ sometimes doesn't sound that great. If I boost at 7.2K and then these high frequencies, I think it's going to cut through a little bit better and then cut some of the lows and the low mids. Without listening to it, should sound great. That's kind of more, I mean, it by itself, you may say, well, Joe, that sounds horrible. True, but I don't really care how it sounds here. I want it to sound good here.
Not alone.
Okay, so that's too much, obviously. Get off my back.
Not alone. We'll experience. Not alone. We'll experience. Not alone. We'll experience.
Feels good. It does feel left heavy though, doesn't it?
Not alone.
Isn't that interesting? This one and this one.
Not alone.
Both the left tracks feel a little louder than the right tracks. So let's bring it down a little bit.
Not alone.
Still feels a little loud on the left. Let's bring the right up a bit.
Not alone. Alone. We'll experience the same. Let me help you. Not alone. We'll experience.
Cool. Let me just put a little more reverb. Yeah, so since we made the vocals so thin and bright, it doesn't sound muddy in the reverb, so we're not adding any mud, because the mix is Honestly, the mix is a little muddy. We're going to fix that later. But now the vocals, those cut through, we hear them, and they have a little space around them, which is nice.
Not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you.
Okay, maybe not that much reverb. I'll bring it back down, and I'll bring the overall volume down because it's actually louder than the lead vocal. So maybe like a 2 dB down or something.
Not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you.
All right, that feels good. We're getting dangerously close to going off on a rabbit trail. So, chorus harmony, we can check that box. Yoink. Lead double up on chorus 2. I think it's talking about the lead vocal double this.
Not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you.
I think it means that vocal 2. So, all right, let's turn it up a little bit. So it sounds more like 2 people. Maybe that's the point. It was sounding like 1 vocal instead of 2 or 3.
Not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you. Help you deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our own words, but we learn to rise again.
Yeah, I like that. The little bit extra volume feels like it made the vocal a little quiet because it's probably hitting the compressor a little bit harder. I'm just going to leave that alone, though, for the sake of not going nuts. All right, solo, more verb on it, some sort of space. Sounds too dry. I can't spell. Sounds too dry compared to everything. Kind of dull sounding, more 5K. So I think it might need space and maybe need more brightness, talking about specifically the guitar solo itself, which is right here. And I'll put a marker. So we put a good amount of space on it. If you recall, we sent it to the spring reverb in the session. I don't want to go nuts because you can go nuts with reverb, and I raise my hand. I tend to go nuts with reverb sometimes. I have a couple of crazy ideas in my head. I'm going to try one just because it seems like fun. We're going to duplicate this track completely. We're going to take the duplicate. You might know where this is going. We're going to transpose it up an octave. Hold on. Two octaves? Let's just try one. That's too awful. Now, just stick with me for a second. What I'm going to do is take the spring reverb that's on this track. We're going to jack it up a little more, set it as a pre-fader send. So it's going to send this no matter what the fader's doing, and then we're going to pull the fader down. So we're not going to hear any of that direct signal. We're just going to hear what it sounds like in the reverb. So we're essentially adding reverb, but adding a higher pitched reverb to the guitar solo. So here's what that sounds by itself. Now, I don't remember if the plug-in happens before the send or not. It does, so we can just EQ out any of that lows and low mids. So we're just hearing the reverb version of that. Now that we've got that, let's blend it with the real solo. It's maybe ridiculous, but I had to try. That's interesting. It sounds stupid by itself, but it might help the guitar do both of the things. So when you read this, initially your thought is, okay, add reverb and boost with EQ up around 5K. And that very well may be the thing it needs. But sometimes it's kind of like when you do a mix for a client and they come back and say, the mix doesn't have enough oomph to it. That could mean a number of things. It could mean let's not make the drums as bright, or it could mean go boost the low mids on the entire mix to give it oomph. Oomph could mean a lot of things. So even here, brighter and more space, there's a couple different ways to go about it. So I'm trying to get to the essence of the problem rather than just the more obvious solution. And plus it's kind of fun to just mess around and try this. So let's see what that sounds like with the crazy reverb on top of it. So now we're gonna listen to it in the mix with everything else.
You're not alone.
That's pretty cool. So we essentially, you know, there's guitar pedals that do the shimmer thing, that'll add octaves and crazy stuff and reverb. We've kind of created that for ourselves. Now, does that fit in a song like this? I don't know, but at this point, I kind of like it. One thing I did do is just turn that reverb, this is the send here, turned it down a little bit. It felt like a little too much. I don't want this to be obvious when you're listening and say, hey, he added an octave to that guitar solo. I just want it to sound like, hey, that solo is cool and has a cool, bright space around it, which I think I've accomplished. Let me just listen again.
You're not alone.
It's subtle that I almost don't know if I heard it there. Let me do it again and just kind of turn it on and off. So when you see this little light up, that means we're hearing the octave thing. When it's off, we're not hearing it. Let me just kind of flip it back and forth and see if we miss it or if we can't hear it. If not, we just need to forget the last 5 minutes of our lives.
You're not alone.
Kind of like it. It's probably more subtle than I don't know. It's more subtle than I thought it would be, but I don't want it to be obvious either. Let's just listen to just the first riff, the or whatever it is. We're kind of splitting hairs, aren't we? I just turned it on and off for each one of those. Let's turn it up a little bit. We might as well hear it if we're going to do it. And then let's just see how that sounds. So we'll start with it off, then we'll add it back in. You are more than welcome to hate what I just did. I've seen some of the comments. People are not liking decisions I'm making. That's totally fine. Totally fine. This is such a subjective thing. If you've ever done a month of dueling mixes, Graham and I will do different things, and the mixes may sometimes be wildly different. And it's not necessarily that one's better than the other, although it might be. But also, there's just creative decisions here. Kind of like if I said, hey, play an E chord on guitar. You know, there's 12 different ways to play it. The one you pick might be different from the one I would pick given the situation. And it's just a personal subjective thing. Anyway, sorry, no more disclaimers. I like it. So what I did there is I turned it up to where it was over the top and then pulled it back until it sits just right. Essentially to where it sat in a spot that gave me the things that I wanted here. I wanted more space and I wanted it to be less dull sounding. And I did all of that by not touching the actual solo guitar itself. Was that a bad idea? A good idea? I don't know, but I kind of like the way this sounds. Super cool. Essentially sounds like I put a Pog pedal on the guitar, right? And it's most, you don't hear it super obvious except for maybe right here. And this is one of those things you could send it back to the client and the lead guitar player says, "No, bro, I spent 2 days dialing in that lead guitar tone. That's what I want. Take that off." Or the other side of that spectrum is they say, "Dude, it sounds amazing. I love it." Or they'll say, "Whoa, that's awesome. What did you do?" Or they may not notice the octave thing. They just know the lead guitar feels good. So this is a more risky move, especially if you're working on someone else's stuff. But this may sound different on headphones too. So we'll have to kind of play that by ear as well. But I'm done with the lead guitar. Let's move on. The extra one, the outro, the extra vocals need to be louder. So there are extra vocals on the outro. These guys right here.
You're not the only one.
Well, they seem loud. Let's just hear it in the mix.
You're not the only one.
Okay, let's turn them up a little bit.
You're not the only one.
Those feel more like background vocals. I'm going to route them to the background vocal bus.
You're not the only one.
One of the downsides of doing the vocal processing the way that I do it, where I run all the lead vocal tracks to one lead vocal bus, is if you go and add something like this to that bus, it's going to add to what's hitting that bus compressor, and you're going to end up with a quieter signal than a louder one, especially when I go and turn it up. So instead of doing that, I just went ahead and routed these to the background vocal bus, which already has some reverb on it, which I wanted, and it's a little thinner sounding anyway.
You're not the only one.
So it gets a little more space and a little more volume, and it doesn't interfere with kind of the mid range of the vocal.
You're not the only one. You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Okay, that feels good to me. We can check that off ye old list. And we're ready to repeat. So remember what I said in the last video. This is my process. You've probably heard me do this a number of times if you've been following Home Studio Corner for any length of time. But I'm going to sit and listen again and kind of figure out where we are. If there's anything, there's probably going to be other things that are going to stand out to me. So I'm going to listen all the way through, touch nothing except have this text file open to take notes and see where we are in the mix. So without further ado, let's do it.
just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be, help me fight and break through me. As lost as I have been, I will rise into the sky. You're not the only one, you're not alone. We'll experience the same, let me help you. Help me deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our own words, but we learn to rise again. You're not alone, we will claim our own terrain. You're not the only one, you're not alone. You're not alone, we all experience the same. Let me help you, help deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our words, but we learn to rise again. You're not alone, we will claim our own terrain. You're not the only one, you're not the only one.
Okay, cool. So a bigger list of stuff than I expected, which is fine. This is one of those parts of the mix where you gotta leave your ego at the door. Is it as borderline embarrassing it is for me to say, oh, I'm doing a mixing tutorial and I have all these problems in my mix. That's what mixing is. We take tracks and we keep fixing problems until the mixes are done. So it can be annoying to say, oh, I got a lot of work to do yet. And you have to get to a point where on some level you could do this over and over and never stop hearing things. So you have to give yourself a little bit of a perspective of some things need to be just left. You don't need to obsess over every small thing, but these all felt like fairly big things, and now I'm going to kind of deal with them somewhat in order of importance. So did you notice a theme here? I said I wanted the drums brighter, or at least the snare drum. Kind of the kick kind of falls in there too. I couldn't hear it, the clickiness of it quite as well as I would like. And then, but the cymbals feel okay, I think. And then I want the acoustics brighter and the electrics brighter. What have you noticed? I've wanted essentially the three main components other than the vocal. Drums and guitars I want brighter. Vocal feels okay to me, but my kind of gut instinct is the overall mix. This is more of kind of I'm almost hearing it from a mastering standpoint. I just need more clarity out of the mix. I may still need to EQ the individual buses or individual components a little bit, but I'm wondering, just curious, if I put some EQ on the mix bus, if that's going to solve a little bit of our problem. So on our mix bus right now, we've got a little bit of a boost at 360 and a little bit of a cut at 4.8K. Probably needs to go the opposite way. So I'm going to wipe these out, and I'm just going to hit play maybe at the final chorus and just listen and see. Just play with the EQ knobs for a minute and see if we can fix a lot of those brightness and kind of mid-range muddy problems just on the EQ on the mix bus. We're not way off. It's not supremely muddy or supremely dark, but it is enough to where I need to address it. If I can fix it here, I'm about 50-50 whether this will fix it, but I want to try it first, because if I can fix it with 2 moves, that would be cool, versus 12 moves on individual tracks. So let's see if this works.
We all experience the same. Let me help you. Help deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our worst, but we learn to rise again. You're not alone. We will claim our own terrain.
Interesting. So I didn't talk you through that because I didn't know where I was going, but here's where I landed. Let's rewind and go back through it. So the two frequency knobs that I chose to mess with were the two mid-range ones. On this particular EQ, I've got a couple options for frequencies. On the high mid, there's 3.2K, which I rarely use except for cutting, 4.8K, 7.2K. 4.8 and 7.2. So it's 4.8, we had a little cut there to kind of, we thought the guitars were too bright earlier. You may remember that. I'm starting to fall in love with this 7.2 band. You think of high frequencies, you think of 12K, 10K up there, which is kind of where this one resides. But most of the stuff, especially in a rock mix, a lot of the brightness you're going to get is more in this range. So I started here and just kind of clicked through. I just did a boost, an over-the-top boost, like 8 dB, and just clicked between the two. This one didn't sound bad at 4.8K, but up here at 7.2K, it got me lots of brightness without really any other artifacts of mid-range, nasally stuff like that can happen when you start messing around with the upper mid-range. Then I went down to here. So when I started, this had a little bit of a boost at 360. And I thought, you remember when I said I might need to boost this one and cut this one? Well, I did. I came back and cut it, and all the life disappeared from the mix. Like, listen to it.
We all experience the same. Let me help you.
There's a fullness that happens at around 360K. If there's too much, it feels muddy.
We all experience the same. Let me.
But if we get at 0 boost here, it's a little too thin there. So with just, it's amazing, like I think I had a dB.5 boost. It adds just enough warmth without making it muddy and increasing the low end. It kind of increases the perceived low end almost, which is super cool. So let's boost that, and you'll hear how it just kind of, everything kind of just clicks into place.
We all experience the same. Let me help you. Help deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our worst, but we learn to rise again.
Now there's a lot of sound happening, and we've just added volume. So ideally there would be some sort of makeup gain here that I could turn down so that before and after doesn't sound quieter and louder. I'm not going to bother trying to do that. It doesn't seem to doesn't really matter. Although we are clipping here. I think that clipping is just from when I boosted it too much. But let me just hit play and check real quick. Okay, we are actually clipping. So we've boosted enough with this EQ to start clipping. So let me do this. Let me add a mix tool after that EQ plugin, and we're just going to bring down just 2 dB. So let's say we boosted, overall probably boosted about 2 dB or so. So now we've fixed it.
We all experience the same. Let me help you. Help deal with this pain.
Now what I want to do is just real quickly, just click this EQ on and off so you can hear the difference. You'll hear the mix goes from what we had before, which was essentially, feels kind of on the muddier side, to boom, it's got a brightness and more clarity, but it also is a little more fullness. Both are present. So let me just click this on and off a few times. When the light is on, the EQ is on. When the light is off, the EQ is off. Just take a listen. Close your eyes for a minute even. Well, then you can't see. Actually, yeah, close your eyes if you want to, and just listen and hear how it brings in brightness and clarity and goes from being nice and full and big and awesome to a little dull and boring, just with 2 little EQ moves. Here we go.
We all experience the same. Let me help you. Help deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our worst, but we learn to rise again. You're not alone. We will claim our own terrain.
I mean, to me, that fixed all the problems. There's a little bit of cymbal washiness that's coming through a little more than I'd like because of that boost, but that's the only, really the only negative I hear to that boost other than is that everything else feels right. We fixed the guitars feeling too dull. We fixed the drums feeling too dull. I don't know if we fixed the acoustic. Let's go listen to a spot with acoustic guitar. We may still need to address that. What did I just do? Undo whatever it is I just did. Let's go listen to a part with acoustic real quick.
And break through me as lost as.
Acoustic could use a little more brightness and possibly volume, but we did deal with Drums feel brighter. Thick, cloudy thing on the guitars at the big section. I'm guessing we might have fixed that as well. We did not fix that. I'll tell you what I'm talking about there in a second. The electrics need to be brighter. Clean up solo mid-range. We'll check to see if we fix that too. Probably not because we added more mid-range, so we'll deal with that. But we've checked off a few things on our list with just one quick EQ move. Let's go fix the acoustics real quick because those should be easy. Right here. Literally just took the boosts that we already had and just boosted them more.
Clear thought, I'm suicidal.
In lots of different scenarios, an acoustic project or a acoustic heavy song, I wouldn't do that. That's not a great acoustic tone, but for this song it works well. And let's make sure the intro still works. Doesn't work as well for the intro, I think because of the volume difference. Look at the waveform. It's clearly louder there. So let's just bring this one down. It looks like about 3 dB. And now it's the same volume as the rest that sounded right. Let's make sure that works. Yeah, that feels good to me. Check that off the list. We will not bother with it anymore. The thick and cloudy thing on guitars at big. Let's check that out real quick. About there is right here where we did that automation, I believe in the last video. There's something kind of muddy sounding on the guitars when they come in big. I noticed it actually. I was just over the weekend giving a quick listen to the end of last week's video to see how it sounded just on my laptop speakers. And I could hear it really clearly there. So listen, when it gets to the big, listen to the guitar specifically. There's like a whoosh sort of sound. Did you hear it? Let me just solo the guitars for a minute. See if we can figure out who's the culprit and then go punish them. So just to be sure, let's mute out the electrics and listen to everything else and make sure that that problem did disappear. Go, go. Just kind of that go, go sort of sound. It's hard to point out. Let me see if I can find it. It's probably one of these darker ones. That might be it. Or maybe it's these kind of crazy guitars that come in just to play just for that transition. Let me mute them out. All right, the sound disappeared. So listen again, I'll turn it on. This kind of whoa. It's in one of these kind of crazy guitar tracks, the little extra parts. Let's listen to those by themselves and you'll hear it. Just a lot of stuff going on. So here's what we're going to do. I haven't addressed these. I didn't think I needed to. But I'm going to take all of these. I'm going to add a bus for them. And we're going to name this bus Extra EG, extra guitars. And we'll just put a single EQ on here just to get rid of that one singular problem. Doesn't need a lot of low end. And then there's something down here. It carries over, it goes, that's what I'm hearing. So if I cut that out, cut it out. Let's see if that now sounds okay in the full mix. I'm just not sure I like those parts just anyway. They come in before the downbeat. Yeah, I EQ'd them, then I'm just going to turn them down because I don't think they're adding a whole lot to that. Let's check here. Okay, those are coming through. Ding! But yeah, I didn't think it added that much. Let's go back and listen to kind of the whole intro thing to make sure that's still working. Cool. Going back to our original note about kick drum, kick and snare feeling a little not bright enough, I'm going to come in here to this kick bus and just boost a little more so I can get a little more click out of it. And I'm going to go ahead with the snare as well. It does feel like it could use a little bit of brightness also. In addition to, so I'm not breaking my rule. This was one of the notes that I made. I may have already erased it. Yeah, I put down kick and snare need to be brighter. We fixed it a little bit with our EQ on the mix bus. That fixed the guitars and the drums a little bit. Still need a hair more brightness out of this snare. Let's see if we can find that right now. Let's go to a spot where they're actually playing. So this is useless because it doesn't really help us in the context of the mix. So let me just play around with this while listening to everything else. Cool, so I actually just used this output gain on the compressor to turn up the brightness with the EQ, and there was a little just too loud overall, the snare, with that boost, so I turned the output of the compressor down a little bit versus moving the fader. There's no reason to do one over the other, and boosted the lows a little bit. That feels good to me, I think. Let's check it in a chorus.
You're not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you. Help me deal with this pain. Time changes as we face our own words, but we learn to rise up.
Maybe a little bit less.
You're not alone. You'll experience the same. Let me help you.
Yeah, that feels pretty good. I mean, it's all kind of messy and all mushed together, but I kind of like that. All right, thick, cloudy thing on big, we fixed. After chorus 1 feels weak. The turnaround after chorus 1.
We will claim our own terrain.
It does feel weak. It goes from...
We will claim our own terrain.
So we're going into a turn, but we're losing 2 guitars. These leads are playing during that chorus. And then we go into a turnaround that just feels a little bit weak. I'm going to try something here. Group these for a second. Let's,
We will claim our own terrain.
just try turning these guitars up for the turn. We're losing the vocal, obviously, we're also losing those lead guitars. So something else needs to fill in that gap volume-wise, or it just feels like a letdown. Let's see if boosting all these guitars 3 dB does the trick.
We will claim our own terrain.
Yep, that fixed it. Need to move the transition point, but that felt much better. Actually feels like we're into something new and exciting versus sitting around for 8 bars, kind of tapping our toes, waiting for first 2 to come around.
We will claim our own terrain.
Just for comparison, here they are at the original volume. Listen to how the turn just feels a little meh.
We will claim our own terrain.
It's like the guitars were here and kind of close, and then they went far away, and we said, "Where'd you go? We missed you." Now,
We will claim our own terrain.
that raises the question of, do we need to do that in other sections? So spots where there are the 4 main rhythm guitars and not the lead guitar, like this, for example.
You're not the only one.
Let's just try it. It can't hurt. I guess it can, but I don't think it will. We'll boost those up 3 right here.
You're not the only one. You're not alone.
I kind of like that. So do you see what I'm doing? When the rhythm guitars play without the lead, it gets a little weak. So instead of doing all sorts of crazy automation, I'm just going to go find spots. It's the same section for each part where they're playing by themselves. Whoops. And just going to bump them up 3 dB.
You're not the only one. You're not alone. We'll experience the same.
Then they sit back when there's a vocal and a lead guitar happening, which is kind of cool. Let's see if we need it here.
You're not alone. We will claim our own terrain.
Cool. I don't think it needs it for the solo because that guitar solo kind of takes up that space, but it does. We do need it for the outro. So right here, crossfade, bump up volume 3 dB. That one felt a little too much, so I'm going to pull it down a dB. Super cool. I like that a lot. So we fixed this problem and we kind of cheated and went on to, no, we fixed this problem, but we fixed it in other places where kind of the same problem was happening. Vocal delay thing, let me do that last. Octave reverb down, it's too much. Hurts my little prideful heart, but let's go deal with it. Where's the solo? Huh? Yeah, it's too much. Let's pull it down a few dB. And let's make this a little less thick. We actually boosted the mid-range here. Let's just take that boost away and see if that helps. Really like that tone now. So I took away the 360 hertz boost that we had, and then I just turned up the output of the compressor a little bit for a little more volume. Now let's just make sure the second kind of harmony solo that comes in isn't too quiet now. downbeat of the chorus. I love the stop and then the bam back in with a downbeat. That feels really good. Okay, so we fixed those. I love it so much. Now I want to do something. Verse 2 sounds a lot like verse 1. And if you've seen some of the videos I've done around production, yeah, this real quick. The verse 2 needs to have something different, and it's pretty similar. So I'm going to try one thing with a delay on the lead vocal, just to add something a little different and interesting. So let's listen real quick.
This be true. How could people have thought this through? Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be. Lay down and die.
So I'm trying to think. I wanted there to be something on the word die. Lay down and die, 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 die. But that doesn't feel right when I sing it out loud.
Lay down and die. Lay down and die. Hopeless.
So maybe a shorter delay there.
I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may.
No, a shorter one would, or a longer delay would just go lay down and die, die. Lay down and die, 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 die.
I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be. Help me fight and break through me as lost as I. I'll just lay down and die. I'll just lay down and die.
So here's something that completely crosses the line. Lay down and die. That's the harmony I hear along the top of it.
I'll just lay down and die.
So I'm going to be super obnoxious, and I'm going to create a harmony here. Just on that, it's kind of a little bit of a dissonant harmony. I'm going to copy this over, and I'm going to Melodyne it. So give me a minute to pull up Melodyne and just tune that sucker. Oink. Oh, don't crash. Okay. So
I'll just lay down and.
I just need the lay down.
Lay down and die. Lay down and die.
Lay.
Lay down and
Lay down and die. I gotta zoom in a little bit.
down. Lay down and down. Lay down and die. Die. Lay down and die.
This is so cheating and just breaks all the rules, but I kind of want to try it.
Wonderful. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be. Help.
And maybe add extra reverb to that one just to.
Wonderful. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless. Wonderful. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless.
Let me try a different reverb.
Wonderful. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be.
I really like it, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to render it, which just basically prints a version, so I'm not running Melodyne in real time. We'll call this a Harmony, which is a fake harmony. And I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to copy that down. And I'm going to delay one of them. So we're going to make a fake stereo out of it. And pan one left and one right. So that one right, this one left. So they sound like this.
Lay down and die.
I don't recommend doing that on main instruments like guitars. That always sounds horrible if it's a main guitar. But for background stuff, you can get away with it sometimes. So now the vocals do this. Everybody together now.
Just lay down and die.
That's super cool.
People have thought this through. Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be.
That gives me, that just scratched a creative itch to just create something interesting there in verse 2 that I think works. And I won't do it again.
To the sky.
I won't do it for the second line, just that one line, a little tease there. And again, this is the kind of thing the client can say, bro, we didn't record those harmonies, take it out. And that's fine. And this is crossing a line of getting into more production and creative stuff. I'll do this occasionally on mixes on little small spots where I just think it'll make an impact and will just be a good thing from an interest standpoint. But I'm always willing to let it go if the client doesn't like it. So let's listen to that verse again and see how that's working.
How can this be true? How could people have thought this through? Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless it may be.
Love it. I'm going to bring the volume down a little bit so it's less obvious, just a couple dB.
Sounds like utter fool. I'll just lay down and die. Hopeless.
Perfect. All right, that wraps up this video. We are very, very close. I think I have done, I've done everything on my list. I need to give it another listen through to see if there's anything else I need to deal with. Things that come to mind are, does the lead vocal get lost with all the changes that we've made? I haven't checked on it because, again, I've just been working through this list. I need to do a full listen again, take a few more notes, see if there's any other changes that I need to make. And then if there aren't, or if there's only a handful, we'll make those changes and we'll call the mix done. Super excited about that. If you want to follow along with me and mix this song yourself, head over to homestudiocorner.com/MT and you can enter your email address, download the tracks, mix it right along with me, and compare notes. And hopefully, in a perfect world, you would get a much better mix than me, and that would be awesome. So go for it and enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.